I have been asked in the years since what it was that finally broke me. Men who knew me in those days, men who called me efficient, exacting, a lord who ran his estate as a general runs a campaign, find it difficult to believe that the answer is this: a bill of account, written in a careful hand, addressed not to His Grace the Duke of Caldervane, but to the household. Not to me at all. As though I were not worth the ink. I deserve that. I did not know it then. I am getting ahead of myself. Her name was Marin Ashby. She had served Caldervane Hall for 3 seasons, autumn to autumn, 3 full years, and I had never once spoken it aloud. That is not an oversight I can excuse. I pass it on to you as the first and most damning fact of this account, so you understand the kind of man I was before she left. She came to us in October of my 34th year, engaged by my housekeeper, Mrs. Pallant, to handle the mourning work that had accumulated after my mother's death. There was a great deal of it. My mother had been a woman of considerable taste and considerable wardrobes, and the estate required her things to be catalogued, altered, preserved, and in some cases remade into garments suitable for the portrait sittings the family solicitor had insisted upon. It was exacting, intricate work. I was told it was being handled. I said good. I moved on. That was my relationship with Marin Ashby for 3 years. I was told things were being handled. I said good. I moved on. I passed her in the corridor perhaps twice a week. She was always carrying something: a length of black silk, a small wooden case of pins, a dress form draped in half-finished work. She always moved to the wall when I passed. I did not slow my stride. I did not nod. I am not certain I ever focused my eyes on her face. She was part of the house, the way the clock on the landing was part of the house, and I no more thought to speak to the clock than I thought to speak to her. I tell you this not to perform a contrition I have not earned, but because you must understand the texture of those 3 years, so that what happened in November makes any sense at all. The final commission was a mourning gown for my mother's last unfinished portrait. The painter required it by the 1st of December. Mrs. Pallant told me it was being handled. I said good, but the work, as I learned only afterward, was extraordinary. My mother had left 3 incomplete sittings, all in different gowns, and Marin had spent the better part of 6 weeks cross-referencing, correspondence, old sketches, and a locked chest of fabric swatches in the east attic to reconstruct what each gown had looked like in its original state. The painter told me later it was the most precise textile reconstruction he had seen in 30 years of portrait work. He had written her a letter of thanks. I did not know any of this the morning she left. I was in the library when Mrs. Pallant brought me the envelope. Plain cream stock, my household seal on the back, but the address on the front read, in a hand I did not recognize, for the attention of Caldervane Hall household accounts. Not His Grace, the household. It stopped me in a way I could not immediately explain. I broke the seal. Inside was an invoice, itemized with the kind of care I associated with solicitors and engineers, not seamstresses. Every hour accounted for, every material listed by yardage and source. At the bottom, in that same careful script, respectfully submitted, M. Ashby. Settled in full upon departure. I read it twice. Upon departure, I went to find Mrs. Pallant. She was in the linen corridor, and she looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face in 20 years of service. Something between pity and reproach, held very correctly in check. Miss Ashby has concluded her commissions, Your Grace, she said. She settled her accounts this morning and took the post road at 8:30. I asked why I had not been informed. Mrs. Pallant was quiet for a moment longer than was usual. She did not believe there was anyone here who would wish to be, Your Grace. I stood in the linen corridor for some time after Mrs. Pallant excused herself. The house was very quiet. It was always quiet. I had run it that way. Efficiently, no unnecessary noise, but this was a different kind of quiet, and I did not care for it at all. I walked back through the east wing past the workroom she had used. The door was open. The room was immaculate. The dress form was covered. The pins were put away. The only sign that anyone had been there at all was a faint smell of beeswax and cedar, and on the work table beneath a paperweight a folded note addressed, again, not to me but to Mrs. Pallant, thanking her for 3 years of kindness. 3 years. I had shared a house with this woman for 3 years, and I had not given her enough of my attention to learn her name from the air. She had not expected me to. She had addressed her final accounts to the household. She had thanked Mrs. Pallant. She had left no note for me because it had not occurred to her, after 3 years, that I would notice she was gone. I went to the stables. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment, because I have been asked whether it was guilt or loneliness or some belated aristocratic conscience performing itself. It was none of those things, or it was all of them underneath something sharper and less comfortable. The sudden, absolute knowledge that I had been careless with something that mattered. and that the carelessness was mine alone, and that she had known it and said nothing, and walked out a front door she had entered 3 years ago as a stranger, and left still a stranger, because I had never troubled myself to change that. The post road to Brethwick was frozen hard. My horse made good time. I found her at the coaching inn at Aldersham Cross, in the yard, her case beside her, waiting on the 11 o'clock coach, with the patience of a woman accustomed to waiting on things that took their time. She did not see me at first. I dismounted, tied the horse, and walked across the yard, and when she looked up, her expression did not change in the way I had grown accustomed to, expressions changing when I approached, the flinch of deference, the rapid rearrangement into performance. She simply looked at me, calm, not afraid, not pleased, simply present in a way I found in that moment almost unbearable to meet. I had rehearsed something on the road. It had not survived the walk across the yard. "Miss Ashby," I said. She said nothing. She waited. "I have your invoice," I said, which was not what I had intended to say. It was addressed to the household. "Yes, Your Grace, you did not address it to me." She considered this for a moment with the same composure she had apparently applied to 3 years of invisible, meticulous work in my house. "I did not think it would reach you," she said, "by that route. There was no reproach in it. That was the worst of it. There was no performance of injury, no expectation of an apology, no arranged display of dignity for my benefit. She was simply telling me the truth as she understood it, and she understood it correctly. I said, 'I do not know your name.' She looked at me. 'I know, Your Grace. Tell me,' I said, 'please.' Something shifted in her face, not much, just at the edge, and she said, 'Marin Ashby.' 'Marin,' I said. I had not planned what came next. I had ridden 12 miles, and I had nothing prepared, and the coach was coming, and I said the only thing that was true. 'My name is Piers, not the title, my name.' She was quiet for a moment. 'I know your title, Your Grace.' 'I know,' I said. 'I am telling you the other one. The one that requires a person to have looked at me first.' The yard was cold. The horses were restless. Somewhere behind me, my own horse shifted against the post. Marin Ashby looked at me, really looked, the way she had apparently been looking at things in my house for 3 years without my ever once returning the courtesy, and I stood there and let her because it seemed, at minimum, the correct thing to do. 'The coach will be here in 20 minutes, she said at last. 'I know. I have accepted a position in Harwick.' 'I know you have not,' I said, 'because Mrs. Pallant told me you had none yet.' The ghost of something crossed her face. Not quite a smile, but near to it. 'I am asking,' I said, 'not commanding. I want to be very clear about that distinction, because I have not always been, and I understand if it is too late to make it. I am asking whether you would consider not returning as a seamstress. I would not insult you with that, but returning. As a person, I would very much like to know, if she is willing to be known by someone who is learning, rather late, how to look." The 11 o'clock coach came into the yard in a clatter of harness and frozen mud, and we stood on either side of it, and Marin Ashby looked at me for a long moment with those steady, unhurried eyes. Then she picked up her case and handed it to me and said, "You had better take that then, Piers. It is heavier than it looks." She was right. It was. But I did not put it down the whole ride home. That was 31 years ago. She still addresses her household accounts to the household. I have never once minded.